Good evening, campers. This is me, Kieran. Today we are going to talk about the 10 modern classics that I feel you must read. This is the second part in a triptych, so if you haven't seen the first, where I talk about the 10 classics that you must read, I will link that down below. A lot of people had some raised eyebrows in regards to that video, and I promise you that's not going to change here as well. There are some caveats within this video that I feel as though I should make you aware of. So the first one is that I don't think these are the best books, and neither are all of these my favourite books. The purpose of this list is to give you, dear reader, a good foundation to have a solid understanding of literature within the 20th century and its ongoing impact and legacy throughout literature. Secondly, these are books that I have read. If I haven't read them or I didn't finish them, they don't make it onto the list. Lastly, I am defining modern classic as any book published between 1900 up until the last day of 1999. That's the boundary, there's the scope, big fish, little fish, cardboard box, let's get into it. Before we get into mine, let me know what some of the modern classics that you think should be on this list. The first author to don this list is predominantly known for his short stories, and I do think you should read his short stories. In fact, if there is a list talking about like the most influential and this person doesn't come up, I would have some questions, and that is Franz Kafka. I think the best novel that Franz Kafka did produce is The Trial. The Trial to me is the epitome of the Kafka-esque. The Kafka-esque, we understand what it is. We can feel it when we see it. But Kafka and his legacy is unlike any others. Things can be Kafkaesque before and predating Kafka and his own works. That's how instinctive it is to us. And Kafka was the author to embody, to explore, to express within his literature, his oeuvre, if you're French, that feeling, that which is Kafkaesque. Everyone should read Kafka. He is like incredible. Let's get this one out of the way. If we're going to talk about influential modern classics, there's going to be two schools of people. The ones who are screaming for 1984 to be on the list, and the other people who think they're a little bit more edgy, and those are the people who stand by Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And so for this list, boom, none of them. We're going to talk about the Russian novel that influenced both of their works. That is the 1921 science fiction dystopian by Yevgeny Zamyatin's We. I spoke about We in a recent video, so I'm just going to stick what I said here because it still stands. We was a direct influence on Orwell's 1984, and the parallels are absolutely stark. Even if you haven't read 1984, you know 1984. You know that story. Within this dystopia, due to the need of bread, the Earth's population has dramatically decreased. One of the engineers who is working on the Starship Integral is going to be embroiled with a party of people who want to usurp the current regime. Thank you very much, Mustachioed Kira. I didn't think you'd be as much help as you were. That clip came from my video, Russian Classics for Beginners, and I'll link that down below as well. Staying in the 1920s and also staying on the continent, we have Thea von Harbau's 1925 novel, Metropolis. Any film student or cinemaphile will tell you that one of the greatest films is Fritz Lang's 1927's Metropolis, but it was actually Fritz Lang's wife who wrote the book in 1925. I should mention that von Harbau's novel was first serialized and then compended together in 1926, but it was all written to the leader of Fritz Lang's film. The novel discusses a society of underground labourers who the wealthy profit off in order to maintain their lifestyle. Metropolis, just like its movie counterpart, really does capture German Expressionism, and German Expressionism had such an influence on world literature where it was about trying to get the emotion across rather than the actual storyline, that this would just feed into the modernists and the postmodernists. So if you're interested within modernism and its postal counterpart, I think German Expressionism is where you need to look. We've said the M words, let's talk about the modernists. I could crack out Ezra's Pound's The Cantos, which I do think is like the greatest modernist like body of work. Move aside T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, no one got time for you. Modernism in the novel form is quite difficult to pin down, and you ask people for like 5 modernist recommendations, you're gonna have like a whole array of variants. So trying to give you one is quite a difficult task, but I think the most successful, and I think the most engaging and exciting, and does a lot more than the modernist counterparts. This novel, while being modernist, is also engaging in postmodernism, and that is my favourite Virginia Woolf book, Orlando, a biography. Woolf wrote Orlando as a love letter to Vita Sackville West, where Orlando, a man, will subsequently turn into a woman, then he'll turn back into a man, and will then turn back into a woman. Woolf, while making malleable the anatomy, is also making malleable the time, and how she is able to constrict and elongate centuries, years, days, which is very similar to what she does within To a Lighthouse. We all know that second part. I'm not over Virginia Woolf doing that to me. I felt absolutely... I felt used and abused by that book. To the Lighthouse. I still can't believe she did that to me. But Orlando, I think, is just a joyous adventure that will give you an absolute wealth and condensed understanding of what the modernists were trying to do. I'm going to cover some space now. We're talking about something that was released from the 1940s all the way up to the 1960s. One of the most influential ages of literature was the golden age of comics, and I think Captain America. Yes, this is the only channel that will talk about German Expressionism, the modernists, and then comic books. You're welcome, people. I'm sure some people will be scratching their heads thinking, did he really just say Captain America comics? And absolutely yes, the Captain America comics. Not only do we see literature as being used as a form of escapism for the Americans to avert their eyes from the war, but equally, can anyone really argue that Marvel is one of the most influential companies to date? I feel as though the golden age of comics really started to integrate to people that comic books could be literature. The literature in and of itself within the 20th century was changing. Without this golden age of comics, I don't think you would be seeing seminal graphic novels such as Mouse and Persepolis making it into the mainstream. Though Captain America might seem like an odd choice, understanding the legacy and influence that Marvel had, it makes complete sense. For the next book, let's talk about one that was published in the 1950s, and that is the Lord of the Rings series by J.R.R. Tolkien. Is anyone going to argue with this? I don't think we need to argue about this one, people. While we've covered fantasy, we might as well cover science fiction. There's actually been quite a lot of science fiction on this list, but the granddaddy of hard science fiction. Let's talk about Foundation by Isaac Asimov. From influencing the epic Dune to the comical Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Asimov's Foundation, this collection of short stories, has just stood the test of time. Asimov's name is synonymous with the greats of science fiction. Next on the list we have Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. This was the first piece of work that was described as fictional non-fiction. Hello. Do you have any thoughts about Truman Capote? Yeah. Oh, do you want to tell us? Do you think it's a must-read modern classic? What do you mean no? What do you mean no? It's my list and I'll do what I want. Hazel's taken over the chair, but we can still continue this list. I think in order to understand constructive narrative around autofiction, but also like speculative non-fiction, In Cold Blood will give you the foundation of what will come in later years. Do you want to say bye? Ardent viewers on this channel will know the one book was going to pop up in this list. Like, it didn't matter like what guise, it didn't matter what shape or form, like this book was getting on there. One of the worst atrocities that ever happened after World War II was the partition of India and Pakistan. That moment of history I still have like surface level understanding of, and it's something that I need to read more of. But really, and I've said this before on the channel, the best partition novel I have ever read is Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children. We all knew it was coming up, people. Salman Rushdie is my favourite author, and I was torn between Midnight Children and The Satanic Verses, both of which I have reviews on, so I'll link those down below. But Midnight Children is an absolute masterpiece. I can't give it enough praise. I could wang on about it all day. I will declare it is the greatest 20th century novel ever written. There's nothing you can say about that book that will change my mind. The last book on this list was written and drawn by Katsuhiro Otomo, and that is Akira. Akira is the seminal cyberpunk work of fiction. Some people might be thinking, well, wasn't that William Gibson? But Akira was written first. Why a cyberpunk novel? Like, is cyberpunk that influential? Well, no. Akira was the first manga that really broke into the mainstream. It was the first manga series to be translated within its entirety. This form of media and its acceptance really broke out of Japan and moved transatlantically. We wouldn't have people reading manga to the extent that they are today. We wouldn't have a resurgence within this form of literature today if it wasn't for Akira. This body of work is absolutely fundamental in understanding people's changing notions of literature. Akira and Captain America give credence and give validation for other forms of literature. And what we'll see is, as we move into the contemporary classics, that changing of form, that changing of structure, that remediation of text can only occur once you have bodies of work like this accepted as literature. Those are the 10 modern classics that you must read. Let me know what you thought about my list, because I imagine there are quite a few people who have quite a few thoughts. But most importantly, let me know what your 10 must-read modern classics are. In the next part of the series, we're going to be looking at contemporary classics from the year 2000 onwards, and I'll see you then. Bye!